don't give anyone from your cup, give them from your saucer. So that your cup is always full. Because what happens, we give and give and give, and then there's nothing left for us. Hello and welcome. Nedbank CIB is proud to present On the Couch with me, Iman Rappetti, and we are celebrating the journeys of three of the top women, Vanessa, Romy and Puleng. It's gorgeous to have you with us. As powerful as you are, there is a story behind your journey to how you get to where you are. And Romy, that's what I want to focus on as we open up this conversation. Career highlights aplenty. I'm sure there were lots of moments you were clinking champagne glasses and celebrating with your family and friends. What we don't document as much is what happens behind the scenes. So maybe we start out with that piece of the vulnerability, the things that happen when you really face challenges, but how you still got to put your strongest foot forward and strongest face forward.
Absolutely. And maybe, you know, my career spanned 16 years, and maybe 16 years ago we weren't talking about it as much, so no one prepares you for it. No one says to you, listen, you're going to get into a corporate setting and this is what you'll face as a woman. This is where you'll face challenges. Here's what you do when those challenges come up. So, yeah, I think it was uncharted territory for a lot of us, and we had to figure it out as we went along.
Romy, we're going to get into the hard hat environment that Vanessa and Puleng are in just a moment. But for marketing, what does breaking through or shattering the glass ceiling look like in your role?
I think in my role, it probably looks like some bravery and some courage to step into rooms that are maybe not as welcoming, to bring other women along with me into those spaces. My team's predominantly made up of women. I'm trying to balance it a bit more. They keep telling me I need more diversity and you need to bring some men into the fold. And I think it's just about being wary of the balance. I mean, luckily in a marketing space, I think it is quite balanced from a male and female perspective. Maybe in production spaces, not so much, but definitely in a corporate setting, I think sometimes we can outnumber them. But really, it just looks like being aware of it. Are there women sitting here? Are they represented? Can I bring more into the fold now that I'm sitting at the table and I have a seat there and I'm sitting on Marketing Exco? Who else can I bring in?
Because we talk about these and this type of behavioural shift in headlines and in concepts, but I love that we're bringing the story into it of how it feels like and what it looks like in real terms. One of the things you often say, Puleng, to other aspiring finance professionals is don't lose your voice and work hard. And those are two very important attributes, especially in a male-dominated environment. I was saying a moment ago that this is a hard hat, very masculine sort of environment. How do you make that real? Share with us some anecdotes.
Making that real is first knowing who you are. Clarity of the mind and making sure that you prepare well and driving vision. In that voice, there has to be purpose. What do I say? What do I mean by that? I mean that when you get into a room and you prepare well with a clear vision and you understand what your purpose is, bearing in mind that you know exactly who you are. You're not trying to be Iman, you're not trying to be Vanessa, you're going in as Puleng. That drives so much humanity in you. And that's what people remember, because that is your voice. And nobody's going to replace that voice.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of almost brings to mind that old adage, people don't remember, they might not remember things about you, but they will remember how you made them feel. When you talk about leaning into that humanity. But what happens when there's opposition? What happens when there's aggressive response to an idea you're putting on the table, or a vision or a plan?
Well, there'll always be, if there isn't, then you've got a problem. There'll always be that opposition. There'll always be that challenge. But as a person, as a professional, knowing and understanding your work, making yourself vulnerable to that room and making sure that when you go in, first you know your work, but you're not saying that you're perfect, right? You know your work, you're not saying that you're alone. You've got a team. You know your work, but you're not saying that you're going to come out with the most. Sometimes you can get a no. But for me, it's always around being vulnerable to that purpose, knowing that, okay, I've given this my best shot, regardless of what the outcome is. Yeah.
And you've prepared, as you say.
Yes.
Vanessa, your team at Nedbank CIB in the property finance department or portfolio in your Manco is led by 4 women. This is traditionally, again, a male-dominated space. How do you get there? And more importantly, how do you stay there and grow women's representation?
I think how you get there is it's kind of similar to what Puleng was saying. It's about really owning your space and not being apologetic about it. I think too often women suffer from sort of this lack of confidence that shows up at the most pertinent moments where actually you need to make your voice heard. And that doesn't mean that you always have to be right. It also doesn't mean that you should be defensive about it.
Or loud.
Or loud, exactly. But I think you have to own your space and be confident and say what you need to say. And, bring your ideas to the table. Too often, it's that imposter syndrome or it's that having to be 100% right. We're too scared to voice our ideas and our opinions about things. But I think, in order to be a leader, in order to advance to the next level, you have to be able to do that. You have to make your voice heard. And I think that's the hardest thing, that anyone has to do. I think in order to stay there, then it becomes less about, yourself, building yourself and progressing yourself. And then it becomes more about building your business, building your team. And as bankers, we all know we're only as good as the people in our team. That's our asset, that and money, right, and capital. So, yeah. So I think then it becomes about building, the people that we have in our team. And that's where, as a woman, then, we do have a responsibility to bring those women along with us as well.
And, one of our desires for this conversation was to really make it real to everyone who was listening and to provide a refreshing take on topics we've talked about for a long time in South Africa. I would love for you to share a moment with us, Vanessa, where, and I think we touched on it a little bit earlier on, where sometimes if your idea doesn't need to be the strongest at that point, how do you open up that space for somebody else to bring their ideas to the table? Can you recall a moment where you might have said, you know what, this is not a moment for me to lean in. I need to step back. Somebody else needs to lean in.
I don't think there's one moment. I think there are many moments. Yeah. My sort of philosophy is I don't have all the answers. I'm not even the expert in the team. The team is made up of, all these different skills, diverse experiences. And so often, we'll be sitting in my team's Manco and I'll say, I don't have all the answers. You guys are at the coalface of it all. You live this every day, whatever it might be that they're talking about. What do you think? Often, and I find, there's this concept called situational leadership where you have to know where to lead the way and give people the answers. And then you also have to know when to step back and, let them discover it for themselves. And I think that's probably the hardest thing that I've learned because I don't always, do that very well. Often there's a tendency to try and control, a given outcome. But I think, the more and more I've kind of really tried to, practice that, the more and more you see your team, really step up, which I think is very important for everyone's own, development.
Yeah. And I want to build on what Vanessa's saying. I think it's getting to know your team very well, really well as people, so you know who's got what strength.
Yeah.
And then I know when a question comes my way, this is a Ref answer or a Juliet answer. They're going to be excellent at doing this because that's her strength. It's not mine. But when you know your team very well, you know what strengths to pull on and who to call on to answer.
I think this is a beautiful, and I'm hoping, Puleng, that's a string you're going to pull. I think it's a beautiful thing to acknowledge because the way that we've been traditionally set up for leadership is you've got to be the one, the paragon of strength. You've got to have all the answers. And what you're sharing with us is gearing, is about knowing when to lean in and when to step back. Puleng?
Even stepping up to your leaders, your line, outside your team members, outside your comfort zone. For me, it's all around tapping into my ExCo members, because that's what they're there for, allowing yourself to be led. Way before even the deal is presented, going in and asking, how would you approach this thing? That, for me, anchors confidence, and what it also says to them as well is that you're allowing them to also be part of the deal as well. And you find them even having a spark when you do that, because they've done it. You know, don't just allow them to be at the tail end of the deal. Include them as well. That is what success in corporate is all about. Being inclusive, whether it's lateral, upwards, or whatever. Just use it.
Puleng, you used the word vulnerability earlier, and I was thinking about that as this conversation's been progressing. Vulnerability sometimes comes across as a weakness. And that's, that's how we hear it amongst other women leaders, for example, is I'm too scared to show my soft, inner self. I want to always provide this kind of armorized exoskeleton. How do you do it in a way that isn't risky for yourself?
You do it. So let me give you an example of how I started my career life. I started my life in Pretoria, and it's an Afrikaans-dominated environment in corporate. Not just corporate, but in language as well. It's Afrikaans and it's male-dominated, and it's a successful business on its own, but it's Afrikaans-led. And here I am as a Black, young, very ambitious, very talkative, wanting to know more. And I remember double-clicking into one of the credit managers at some point, asking what this word means, and it just being as simple as that. And for me, for him, it was a shock that I'm even asking that. But that also opened up another conversation, because once you open up that vulnerability about yourself, that you're curious, you want to know more, you'll find out that there is so much more to find, to really discover. Once you make yourself vulnerable and you're conscious about knowing more.
I think that's really powerful. And I'm really hoping that for everyone who is listening to our conversation today, that there's a shift in perspective on how we typically view how we rise and how we continue to lead. Are there any other misconceptions, Vanessa, Romy, that you think people might have, especially women leaders, around the glass ceiling in a South African context and in your very specific portfolios, Vanessa?
I think for me, the glass ceiling, I think when I first started out, I could feel it, I knew it was there, but I've been very lucky that, my most important sponsors in my career have been men. And, and they've been quite intentional about, their sponsorship of me. And I think, many of us have those stories. So, I think this, again, another concept is the concept of male allyship. I think is one that maybe isn't, as much as we talk about the opposite side of it, it's not a concept that's maybe celebrated as much as it should be, because many of us are here because, we had male sponsors.
Some of them are scared we're going to make them extinct.
Yes. Exactly. There's that fear of,
obsolescence,
livelihood being threatened. And I think that's why it is so important for us to, do the same for our fellow women colleagues and our male colleagues as well. That is part of being a leader, allowing people the chance to shine and to step up.
Okay, so you've talked about male allyship and you've talked about male sponsors. Anecdotally, we hear that women don't sponsor other women as much, Romy. What's your experience been in this regard, and how do you change that?
And look, I think there can be this feeling of scarcity, right? Once I've made it or shattered a ceiling and now I'm sitting here, I don't know if there's space for more. And I think it's breaking that perception that there's space for all of us women that can sit there. There really is. There really is. And I sit on an exco where the women outnumber the men. And we all sit on that exco and we all have different talents and skills that we bring to the table. But I completely hear what you're saying. I've had the same thing in my career where I've had male sponsors who've had my back, who've got me there, and women as well. And I work for 3 very powerful, incredible women that I learn a lot from every day. I just think as women, we must be careful about the scarcity mindset that you can feel when you shatter a ceiling and you're finally sitting there. You do see it sometimes. There's enough space for all of us, absolutely.
I actually notice it very much so. And it's, we were talking about the little girl, in us. I notice it a lot in, young women, joining the organization, joining the bank. For them, it seems, like such a mountain because, and they have these role models. So it always takes me aback that, this has to continue. We have to keep talking to our women and we have to keep guiding them. And I think that's why, coaching and mentorship programs or, facilitations of that kind of nature are so important. It still takes me aback, that so many young women still feel that way.
How does it feel to be referred to as top women?
Still doesn't feel right. Yeah.
I guess, and it has been a journey to here. Our marquee theme for our conversation is shattering the glass ceiling, and I'm sure that there are so many elements to that because we often celebrate with our families and with our friends those career moments and those career highlights. But we talk less about what happens behind the scenes when things start to go a little bit tough. And I don't know, Romy, if you want to kick us off with a recollection of a tough moment where you still had to show up in strength and authority.
Yeah, I mean, over my career, there have been many. Maybe one that I can remember and really talk about is a previous job that I worked in. Was quite a tough environment, hard to come into work every day. Everything I did was questioned. And I think environments like that make you start to question yourself. The decisions you make, things that used to come naturally to you, you second guess yourself. And I think that's probably for maybe me and a lot of women, things that happen to us quite often. And it's finding your way and navigating through situations. And sometimes there isn't a right way through navigating a toxic environment. You actually just have to get out. But like you said, your friends and your family, the people who know you really well, your support system matters in times like that. So, yeah, it's I guess it's tough. Yeah.
And we'll talk about what it really takes practically to navigate tough environments. But it does take a lot of grit and hard work to be able to break through a barrier that was there before. When you think about who you want to be, not only as a woman, but as a leader, and a leader leading in such an intense field, how did you think about it and where you would ultimately land?
Thank you for that. I think for me, it's been such a journey because I've always wanted to be successful. Regardless of my humble beginnings, I've always known that I wanted to succeed in what I do. Having grown up in what we call education, where we see a lot of girls that are doing so well at school, but they end up nowhere. I have always had the courage from my mom to do better, to go over the hurdle and do my best to do well.
So that was wonderful that you had that really strong role model at home in your mom. Vanessa, I don't know if there's a tender story you can share as well about thinking about the woman you wanted to be in the world and the kind of leader you aspired to become.
I think at the age of 14, I knew already that I wanted to be a chartered accountant. I didn't really...
A chartered accountant at 14?
At 14. Yeah, I'm not sure where that came from, but I knew I wanted to be in finance. I was that nerd that would read the Financial Mail and Finance Week. But I just knew that that's what I wanted to do. It was almost like a gut feel. I don't think I ever thought about leadership and, the people aspect of and about having a team. I just knew that, I wanted to be in finance and that was my dream. And fast forward to, all those years later, and here I am in a bank and on this podcast. So it does feel quite surreal to think about, when you were a little girl and and where you are now.
I think, all of us want to hug that little girl that we were in being able to navigate through so much and arrive at a point where you're not only successful in your career, but you're also successful in your personal life. Sometimes those things don't always go together. But let's talk about breaking through paradigms that are kind of set or preset for us. As head of marketing, Romy, in your role, marketing doesn't always necessarily enjoy a seat at the table. How do you bring visibility and how do you bring gravitas to an area where people might think, that's peripheral to what we're doing or peripheral to the business and focalize it and make it a central piece?
I think first and foremost, it's about understanding the business, especially for marketing, because it's, like you said, it's not always at the front and center of a finance business or a bank, And then I think it's about adding value. So it's about knowing the strengths of what marketing can bring. And when you couple that with what does the business do and need, and bring that to the table, you can't argue with adding value. I think that's the most important thing. Before you think about doing big campaigns or being overly ambitious, focus on adding value. People can't deny that, and they notice that, and it makes a difference in businesses.
Do you feel that it's extra hard when you have to pioneer a space for yourself? Because I think that resonates for a lot of women who aren't traditionally included but want to be.
I think it is, but I also think you need to reframe it in your mind as an opportunity and get excited about it and go, well, actually, I can make a difference here. I can bring something into the space that maybe they've never seen before. And that actually, I try and reframe it instead of looking at it as a big, scary problem. I go, well, what could I do and what difference could I make and what magic could I add?
I really love that because it speaks to the attitude of success and the attitude of problem solving and wanting to make a difference. Puleng, I think that connects very strongly with your story as well. Public sector, finance, infrastructure. As a journalist, you hear the president talk about the country being turned into, construction site. So there's a big push and there's a big demand on how we grow this particular sector. And you're front and center. You're leading that for Nedbank CIB. How do you connect the external pressures with the internal pressures to succeed in such a niche role?
For me, it's always around knowing what to do when you don't know what to do. Because balancing between what the client needs are and having to lead a group of expertise at the same time that know everything, but leading a vision and making sure that the bank delivers to a client what is required to be delivered. It's always that balance. And being in client coverage myself, I always act as a glue, as a balance between all worlds, what the client actually requires and how we need to deliver internally. So there's always that push, that balance that I always have to have. One, to make sure that I listen to everyone. Secondly, I make sure that I prepare. Thirdly, I understand my business well. Infrastructure has got a big elephant to be cut into different pieces. What is required? Where is the focus areas? And how is it that as a bank, as a posture, what do we need to show up as a unit?
It sounds like you have to create some kind of alchemy and chemistry to get everything, every element optimized and working together in harmony. And I want to bring that to you, Vanessa, next. In property finance, it's not just about brick and mortar. It's also about creating this beautiful alchemy that Puleng is talking about and building a transformative, inclusive space. Sometimes we might not be the smartest person in the room, but you need to rely on the talents who are and optimize those. How do you do that?
The team that we have within property finance, because they live and breathe it, they come up with the most amazing ideas. And a lot of what they do is actually connecting investors and developers together, which is actually a key part of what, I think bankers and financiers do. It's not just about putting the money on the table. It's about facilitating introductions, helping relationships grow.
I want to tease it out just a little bit more because, as you say, it's not just about the building, it's not just about the plans and envisioning what could be. It's when you see real-life impact to the communities around those projects. Talk to us a bit more about that inspiration, or perhaps what it does to you when you see a project all the way to its conclusion. While it's financially successful, there's a major social impact.
I think that, for me personally, and I think for, the team within property finance at Nedbank CIB, that's probably why we do what we do. We obviously fund, we fund big retail shopping centres, we fund big warehouses, office blocks, but a lot of what we do talks to that social impact, and that's really encompassed in the affordable housing projects. We fund student accommodation projects. And something that is quite close to my heart, that I get a lot of pride and satisfaction out of, is a lot of the retail and precincts that, we help create within rural outlying areas, within the township spaces. That, I think, is something that really unlocks opportunity. It's about the job creation that happens when a project is being built. It's about the job creation when, for example, a retail centre is being built out in, Tonga and in Mpumalanga. It's just, the impact that you can actually see and feel, which is borne out by the people that are now working, shopping, have access to amenities and services. They don't have to pay, money to, take them 20 kilometres away to the nearest shopping centre. I think that real life impact is why we do what we do.
And it's a beautiful thing to watch because it's projects hopefully into perpetuity, where you can see legacy starting to be built. And Romy, part of capturing public imagination or, capturing brand affinity is changing people's minds. I mean, I often think of marketing people as the original influencers because you have to change the minds not only of the organization that you represent, but the people out there, your consumers and your client base. How much of a challenge is it in being able to do that beautifully and not seeming out of step with the times either?
It's about storytelling. It's about taking these projects and how we uplift these communities when we go in with the work that we do, just telling that story. It's difficult, but it's also just being honest, and it's telling just the real human story. And that's really what it's all about. And I think sometimes as marketers, we forget that our primary role is just storytelling. And so, that's how we do it, and we keep honest about it.
So, Puleng, you're seeing that girl coming through the turnstile, first day of work, whole future ahead of her. What would you like to say to her?
You are where you ought to be. That is the first thing that I'll say to her. The second thing is that it is a journey, and be kind to yourself. While you're being kind to yourself, get into the habit of filling your cup first. That's exactly what I would say. And they say that to myself each and every day, even after 26 years.
Oh, Puleng, and I've got actually another version of that same saying, an idea. It's don't give anyone from your cup, give them from your saucer. So that your cup is always full. Because what happens, we give and give and give, and then there's nothing left for us. It's been such a wonderful conversation, Vanessa, Romy, Puleng, today. It's been full of inspiration, purpose, but I think for me, most importantly, utility. Because what we've heard, we can implement and enact out there. So I really appreciate you. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of On the Couch with me, Iman Rappetti. And I look forward for you joining us for the next installment. Thank you so much.